Good morning, everyone. And we studied this week the portion of Toldot. I am sharing with you the Rebbe's talk from the book, Selections from Likutei Sichos, the first talk. The Rebbe begins by saying that there is an adage, a phrase in the Holy Tongue, Maise Ovois Siman Lebonim. Whatever happens to our forefathers is an indication of what's upcoming for the children, for the descendants. In other words, you might think that we read in the Torah about stories that happened to Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and it's just showing us history, but that's not the case. The reason we read about the stories is because it's an indication of what is coming to the children. As Rabbi will share that it's not just happens in history, like Sarah was taken captive in the house of Pharaoh and the Jewish people were taken captives as slaves into Egypt later on, but it happens and repeats itself in every generation, in every person. Says the Rebbe that the fact that Yitzchak, Isaac, had never left the Holy Land, as the Torah in this week's portion, chapter 26, verse 2, says the following: there is a famine, and Yitzchak wants to do exactly what his father did, which is leave the Holy Land, go to a place where there is food. We read the following. God says to him, verse 2, God appeared to him and said, do not go down to Egypt, inhabit the land which I will tell you about, settle in this land, and I will be with you and I will bless you. For I will give all these lands to you and to your descendants, and I'll uphold the oath that I swore to Avraham your father. I will multiply your descendants like the stars in the heavens, and I will give you, your descendant, all these lands. He goes on and on and on to ask him, do not leave the Holy Land. Unlike Yaakov and Avraham, which Avraham was born outside of Israel, and only at the age of 75 he immigrates to the Holy Land, and even then he goes out to Egypt several times. Yaakov, same story, he ran away from his brother Esau, and he lives many years in captivity at the end of his life in Aram, with his father-in-law. And later on in his life, he ends up in Egypt for 17 years. So a lot of years he did not live in the Holy Land. Yitzchak is the only one who never left the Holy Land. Says the Rebbe that the simple lesson from it is that the natural place of a Jew is in Israel. When God comes to Yitzchak and says, do not leave the Holy Land, stay there and I'll bless you and provide you with all your needs, it is an indication that a Jew's natural place is in the Holy Land. That explains another thing, says the Rebbe. I'm reading now page 277, the second paragraph. This may be one reason why in the ultimate future we will say to Yitzchak specifically, you are our father. The Talmud teaches us in Tractate Shabbat that when Mashiach arrives, we're going to turn to Yitzchak and say, you are our father. We won't say it to Avraham, we won't say it to Yaakov, even though they are all our fathers. They are the fathers of our nation. And the reason is, says the Rebbe, at that time the Jews will exhibit the qualities of the inner perfection and fulfillment whose potential they derive from Yitzchak, the perfect burnt offering. Therefore, at that time, they will be found in the true place at their father's table in Eretz Israel. Living only in Eretz Israel is relevant specifically to Yitzchak, who never left that land. By contrast, Avraham and Yaakov lived in the diaspora for significant periods of their lives. Says Rebbe, that now explains what the Gemara says, that we will relate to Yitzchak and say to him, you are our father. The reason is because Yitzchak embodies redemption. Yitzchak embodies the period of time when there is no exile, and therefore we are around the table of God, which is the Holy Land. Who did that in their lifetime, entire lifetime? Yitzchak, to the exclusion of Avraham and Yaakov. What?
You also couldn't leave because you had been in Ola.
That's God told him, you're complete burnt offering, right? And therefore you cannot leave. But that explains, now we are discussing why is at the time of Mashiach, we will turn to Yitzchak and say, Ki ata Avinu, you are the only father. Says the Rebbe, the difference between Yitzchak and Avraham and Yaakov, let's talk about Avraham, applies also here in diaspora outside of the Holy Land while we are in exile. In other words, until now we connected Yitzchak restrictions from living the Holy Land to the period when the Jewish people all are going to be redeemed and living in redemption in the Holy Land. But at this moment in time, majority of Jews do not live in the Holy Land. We live outside of Israel. How is it applied today to me, living outside of Israel?
Aren't we becoming close to having more Jews in Israel than anywhere else?
I don't know if we're becoming close, but the reality is that since exile, there have never been majority of Jewish people living in the Holy Land. Never.
You had a big exodus in the last 3 years. There was a lot.
Big exit, yes.
Since
When did you say?
Since the exile. The destruction of the temple.
a lot of people.
For over 2,000 years. That's even if we don't count the 9.5 tribes. In other words, the people who identify themselves as Jews, you have more Jews living in diaspora. And it's been this way since the destruction of the temple.
Remember the Rango commercial?
Because when God left his home, we were kicked out of the house. And no matter what you try, we are still out because we have to ask for Mashiach to bring us back. Says the Rebbe, in our day-to-day life, there are two ways in which a person can relay and connect to God. And they are named. There is names of tribes. One is called Zebulun, and the other is Issachar. What's the difference between, these are two of the 12 sons of Yaakov. What's the difference between them?
One was very prosperous.
Issachar, we call it Yoshev Ohel, living inside a tent, studying Torah. Zebulun was a merchant. He would travel by sea, cross the sea, to do business across the oceans. Both served God, but one served God when, I'm going to use the phrase internally, the other served God externally. One served God internally, meaning they lived in their own dwelling and studied Torah. That's how you serve God. God wants you to study Torah like we do now. And doing so, you seal yourself, you separate yourself from the rest of your surrounding because you need to concentrate and you need to connect to God through the study. Zebulun, on the other hand, served God on an external measure. What he did was impacting the universe. He would do business and share with people that he always do business in honesty. And on Shabbat, he does not do business. And every time he has a blessing, he thanks God. And he gives part of his success back to community, back to God. In other words, he was trying to change the society and the world around him into connecting to God. In that way, it's an external because he has to leave his home, his dwelling, his comfort, and connect with people outside his home. Says the Rebbe, Issachar is a comparison to Yitzchak, where God says to him, don't leave your home. Either your home base, or your land, or your private home. Stay there, connect to me. That's Yitzchak. Yaakov and Avraham, on the other hand, were like Zebulun. They connected to the world outside. They had to leave the Holy Land and interact with their surrounding. That's why Abraham, even before God said to him to travel to the Holy Land, we read that he converted men and Sarah converted the women. We read about the fire and destroying the idols of his father and being thrown into the fire because he had to demonstrate his relationship with God, and the bond that is created is everlasting to impact the surrounding. Therefore, he had to be outside the Holy Land. Just like Zebulun, he wouldn't be home all day, every night. He would be outside because he had to interact with the surrounding universe. So therefore, both are acceptable. Both are a way of serving God, except one is expressing Yitzchak's relationship, and the other expresses Abraham's relationship. But says the Rebbe, we need to understand that the ultimate way is Yitzchak. Why? Because we call the name of this portion by the word what? Toldot. What are Toldot means? What does the word Toldot? Children. Children. So there are two questions. The Rebbe does not ask these questions, but there are two questions that, based on the Rebbe, they can be accommodated. The first question is, why name this portion Toldot, where the word Toldot appeared many portions ago, and you do not call it Toldot? The portion of Noah. Eile Toldot Noah. Same thing. Eile is a general word, these. You cannot call the portion these. But the next word is Toldot. And the third word is Noah. And we call it the portion based on the third word. It should be named Toldot the first time around. This week, it starts Eile, these, Toldot, the children of Yitzchak. Eile Toldot Yitzchak ben Avraham. So use the second word, Toldot, and we name this week's portion Toldot. Why? We should name Noah Toldot. In addition, says the Rebbe, if you read the text, you say these are the children of Yitzchak, the son of Avraham, and what are you reading about? Avraham oledet Yitzchak. Avraham fathered Yitzchak. Avraham is not his child. And in addition, we read about Yitzchak, who was 40 years old when he married his wife, and then he did not have children. That's what it says. And they start praying, and God tells them, God blesses them, and then it's a very difficult pregnancy, and the prophet tells her, you're going to have twins. But you want to talk about his children, say who the children are. Rashi asked this question like every other commentator, and Rashi says, Yaakov and Esav that are mentioned later in the portion. In other words, the Torah begins this week's Torah portion with, these are the children of Yitzchak, but we're not going to hear about them immediately. But during the rest of the portion, you're going to read about them, about their birth, about their conduct, about one becoming a deceiver and a cheat, the other become a simple man that is connected to God. But it does not address the question. The portion should be not named the word Toldot. It should start with the word Yitzchak. And Toldot should be by the portion of Noah. In addition to Noah, Noah wasn't Jewish. Yitzchak was Jewish. He's our father. So name the portion Yitzchak. Why dedicate a portion to Noah? And name the portion of Noah Toldot. Says the Rebbe, it is because in this week's Torah portion, we read about the descendants of Yitzchak. That's the only portion that completely dedicated to one man, Yitzchak. Before, last week, it's dedicated to Avraham and Yitzchak. Next week, it's Yitzchak and Yaakov. But this week is the only portion that you read about Yitzchak's life and his children. First, we learn from here that the actual children of a person is his deeds, his good deeds. That's one of the explanations. That's why we call it Toldot, because we read about Yitzchak, how pious and how holy he was, the Rebbe is going to spell out. But according to Rashi, we read in the portion about Yaakov and Esav, the two sons. Says the Rebbe, that comes to teach us, you do not pick and choose who you connect with. If God put in your life a person who is like Esav, a very evil person, you need to create them as one of your descendants by teaching them, by convincing them to be the good person, instead of creating a wall, a barrier, and says, this is not my kind of guy. And that applies even to Yitzchak. Yitzchak was an internal servant of God. Remember, we spoke about the difference between Zvulun and Issachar. He is like Issachar. He's sitting inside his dwelling and he's studying Torah. Yet the Torah calls it the Toldot, not naming Yitzchak, but the descendants of Yitzchak, because he realized that his interaction, albeit within the boundaries of the Holy Land, within the boundaries of his internality, but he has to interact with anyone who is in his surrounding. And that includes even Esav, not just Yaakov. And as we read in the Torah, Yitzchak ahavet Esav. Yitzchak loved Esav. In other words, Yitzchak knew that his service of God it's not just to study Torah, but if he's surrounding family members, close relatives, members, associates, club friends, he needs to interact with them regardless of their conduct, regardless of their belief, regardless of the direction they're taking. Did I make myself clear? Huh? Says the Rebbe, that will explain another point, and that is, I don't understand, in the time of Mashiach, we are told that all of the Jewish people will immigrate to the Holy Land. It says that they all go to Israel. Where will be all the nations of the world? They will be all around the universe. And the prophet tells us that they will say, the God of the Jews is so great. Let us go immigrate to the Holy Land and watch and see how his children interact with him. And they will accept the 7 laws of Noah. That's what it says. Says the Rebbe, if the time of Mashiach is compared to Yitzchak, where he dwelled inside the tent, how will he, the only way to serve God at the time of Mashiach, other than study Torah, is to affect the non-Jews, because all the Jewish people will be connected to God. That's what Mashiach is. We have a very clear channel with God. The only way to change the world and please God is by helping a non-Jew recognize and acknowledge God and accept the 7 laws of Noah. But all Jews are going to be in the Holy Land. Non-Jews will be all around countries. They'll be in India and Thailand and Pakistan. How do you affect them? Says the Rebbe, this is the reason when Mashiach will come, we will say to Yitzchak, you are our father. Because if you look in this week's Torah portion about the descendants, spiritual descendants of Yitzchak, he never left his home. We read in this week's Torah portion in the story of Avimelech. Avimelech is the king of Gerar, a very famous man. He turns to Yitzchak and he says, Lech meimanu. In Arabic we say, Ruch min hon. Get out of here. I don't want you because you're much bigger, you're more successful. I cannot enjoy life, all that I see, so many fields, so many servants. Later on, within the same chapter, Avimelech and Pichol and his hosts of his ministers, they go to Yitzchak and said, we saw God is with you, we want to make a covenant with you. In other words, they have 180 degrees return. Says the Rebbe, Yitzchak never tried like Abraham to pitch a tent and invite people and convince people. He's serving God, he's studying Torah. His impact is so powerful. Like someone who has a good fragrance that is wearing what do you call it? A cologne that is so effective too far that people say, it smells so good, it's so great. What kind are you using? In other words, his effect on the universe wasn't in a direct interaction where he goes out, try to convince them and tell them, but they came to him. Not only that, these are people who first said to him, you are nothing to do with us, we don't want anything with you, get out, get away. Yet they turned back and they went to him and they want to have a covenant with him. As the adage was at the time, people would say, the dung of the mules of Yitzchak is better than the silver and gold of Avimelech, of the king. Because the blessing that the dung of his mules are producing is a greater value than the gold and silver. Gold and silver, you put in the stock market, you might win, you might lose, you never know. The dung of his mules are guaranteed to produce 100-fold. In other words, Yitzchak was affecting his surrounding, his universe, without getting out of his comfort zone, so to say, without getting out of his dwelling and study of Torah, his tent, and people came to him and they will change. Says the Rebbe, that's exactly how we will serve God at the time of Mashiach. We will not need to leave the Holy Land because a Jew's natural place, habitat, is the Holy Land. The other nations will come and say, let's see, we heard so much greatness about the Jewish people. They in harmony, they love God, they all serve one God. Unlike nations, each one has their own God. This one has a cow, the other one has goats, the third one has a mountain. Each one has a different God. Let us go and discover the Jewish people, and they will come to the Holy Land and change. So how does a Jew today, how do I serve God? I can either be Issachar, studying Torah, but I'm not impacting my surrounding. Or I can be like this Torah portion of Toldot, the descendants of Yitzchak, go out of your comfort zone, outside to a strange place for a Jew, and connect with people and say to them, there is a God, serve him, be honest, share your wealth, share your knowledge, make sure you're creating a good surrounding. The time of Mashiach, it's going to be Yitzchak style. We're going to be in our natural habitat in the Holy Land. The rest of the nations will come to us and get impacted naturally without our efforts, without us living our boundaries. Just like in this week's Torah portion where we read that Avimelech turned 180 degrees and all the people around started speaking that Yitzchak has greater blessing than anything else. That's why, says the Rebbe, the portion is called Toldot, children, because there is a difference between a teacher, or there is a difference between community where one affects the other. Toldot, children, get impacted directly. It's we call it today a DNA. In other words, the nature of a father and mother goes down to the child. The child can choose to be blessed or can choose to reject it. The child may receive natural behavior from his parents which are not good, and he can choose to reject it or to accept it. This is nature. In other words, the connection between the father and the children is direct, is not uninterrupted. That's why the Torah portion is called Toldot Yitzchak, because the true nature of a Jew is in the Holy Land. And the true nature of the true ultimate goal is for us to change the world like Yitzchak, where we reside in the Holy Land, and our positivity and service of God is so great, so powerful, that nations around are turning around and say some magic is taking place in the Holy Land. Let's just go and learn. And once they arrive in Israel, in the Holy Land, the Jew will say to them, you have 7 laws of Noah that you have to serve God with, and therefore by doing so, you will be blessed. Let's hope it will happen soon. And now we know our job when Mashiach will come. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rabbi.